If you've ever strutted through an airport, feeling like you finally made it in life, you'd understand where Tiffany Harris was coming from that day. 32 years old, sharp as a tack, and dressed to kill in a tailored navy suit that practically screamed, "I'm the boss." Tiffany wasn't just confident. She was a storm waiting to happen. But oh boy, did life have a nasty habit of testing your patience when you least expected it. It was JFK Airport, the kind of place where chaos and overpriced coffee coexist in perfect disharmony. Tiffany, armed with her first-class ticket and a carry-on that probably cost more than a month's rent for most, was heading to San Francisco for a business meeting that could make or break a major deal. She had every reason to feel on top of the world. But here's the kicker. Life had other plans. Standing at gate 17, she couldn't help but notice the stares. Not the friendly, "Hey, nice outfit" kind, but the "What the hell are you doing here, burrito?" variety. And leading the charge was Melissa, a tall blonde flight attendant with a smile faker than reality TV drama. Melissa's uniform was pristine, her demeanor polished, but her eyes, they told a whole different story. Tiffany had seen that look before, the kind that said, "You don't belong here." As Tiffany handed over her ticket, Melissa's smile tightened, like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Excuse me, ma'am," Melissa said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Are you sure this is your flight?" Tiffany arched a brow. "Unless the ticket in my hand is lying to me, yes, I'm sure." Melissa hesitated, her eyes flicking over Tiffany's outfit, her hair, her skin. "It's just, I don't see your name on the passenger list." Tiffany could feel the heat rising in her chest, but she wasn't about to lose her cool, not yet. "Really? Because I'm holding a first-class ticket with my name printed right here. Maybe you want to take another look?" Now, let's be clear. Tiffany wasn't new to this kind of nonsense. Growing up on the south side of Chicago, she'd dealt with her fair share of people who assumed they were better than her. Teachers who doubted her abilities, employers who underestimated her, even neighbors who couldn't fathom that a little black girl from a working-class family could dream big. But Tiffany didn't just dream. She conquered. Still, there was something about Melissa's smug smile that made Tiffany's blood boil. It wasn't just the dismissal, it was the sheer audacity. "Maybe there's been a mistake," Melissa continued, clearly enjoying herself. "You can check with the desk to make sure you're on the right flight." "Oh, I'm on the right flight," Tiffany said, her voice steady but sharp enough to cut glass. "The question is, are you sure you're in the right job?" Melissa's smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. "I'm just following protocol, ma'am." Tiffany gave her a look that said, "You must be out of your damn mind." But she stepped aside. For now. She wasn't the type to cause a scene unless it was absolutely necessary. But let's be honest, she was getting real close to necessary. As she walked back to the check-in desk, Tiffany couldn't help but think about how far she'd come. From sharing a cramped apartment with her mom and little brother, to running her own multi-million-dollar empire, she'd fought tooth and nail for everything she had, and she sure as hell wasn't about to let some overzealous flight attendant make her feel like she didn't belong. The guy at the desk, a nervous 20-something with sweat stains under his uniform, confirmed what Tiffany already knew. Her ticket was valid, her seat was legit, and Melissa was full of it. "You're definitely on the list, ma'am," he said, avoiding eye contact like his life depended on it. "I don't know why there was an issue." "Oh, I know why," Tiffany muttered under her breath. "Trust me, I know exactly why." With her ticket reconfirmed, Tiffany headed back to the gate, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a countdown to Judgment Day. Melissa saw her coming and visibly tensed. Tiffany didn't say a word, just handed over the ticket again with a look that could freeze hell over. Melissa scanned it, her fake smile firmly in place. "Oh, I must have missed it earlier. My mistake." Tiffany leaned in, just enough to make it personal. "No, honey, your mistake was thinking you could play me. Don't let it happen again." As she stepped onto the plane, Tiffany could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her. Some looked curious, others uncomfortable. She didn't care. Let them stare. Let them wonder. Tiffany Harris wasn't here to play nice. She was here to make sure no one ever forgot her name. And Melissa? Oh, she'd regret the day she decided to mess with the wrong woman. But Tiffany wasn't going to show her cards just yet. Sometimes, the best revenge is served with a smile. Tiffany's shoes clicked sharply against the polished floor of the airplane aisle, each step a reminder to anyone watching that she wasn't the one to mess with. She slid into her first-class seat, a plush, oversized throne that reeked of luxury, and let out a slow, steady breath. But if you thought she was about to relax, you clearly didn't understand Tiffany Harris. Her mind was already spinning, calculating her next move, because this wasn't over. Oh no, this was just the appetizer and the main course. Let's just say it was about to get real spicy. As she settled in, Melissa appeared again, practically materializing out of thin air like some blonde ghost of bad customer service. Her fake smile was plastered on tighter than ever, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted nervously like she knew she'd already stepped in it, but couldn't figure out how to clean her shoes. "Can I get you something to drink, ma'am?" Melissa's voice was sugar-sweet, but Tiffany could taste the bitterness underneath. Tiffany tilted her head, giving Melissa the kind of look that could make grown men cry. "Oh, so now you're ready to serve me? That's cute." Melissa's smile faltered, just for a moment. I just want to make sure you're comfortable." "Comfortable?" Tiffany let out a dry laugh, the kind that said, "Are you actually serious right now? Girl, you tried to kick me off this flight 10 minutes ago and now you're asking if I want a Diet Coke? Do I look like I'm in the mood for your half-assed apologies?" The tension in the cabin was thicker than the overpriced cologne coming off the guy in the next seat. Passengers were starting to glance over, their curiosity piqued. Tiffany didn't care. She wasn't here to play nice or keep the peace. She was here to set the record straight. Melissa opened her mouth to say something, but Tiffany held up a perfectly manicured hand. "Save it. Just bring me water. No lemon, no ice. And while you're at it, you might want to think about how you're going to explain this little fiasco to your boss." Melissa's face flushed crimson, and for a moment Tiffany thought she might actually cry. But Tiffany wasn't in the mood for sympathy, not today. The flight took off without further drama, but Tiffany's mind was still racing. She replayed the interaction at the gate, the condescending tone in Melissa's voice, the way she'd looked at Tiffany like she didn't belong. It wasn't just rude. It was insulting on a level that struck a nerve deep in Tiffany's soul. She thought back to her childhood in Chicago, to the teachers who told her she'd never amount to anything, to the neighbors who whispered behind her mother's back, to the endless little slights that had built up over the years. Tiffany had worked too damn hard to let anyone treat her like she was less than. Not now. Not ever. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as the flight attendants started their service. Melissa returned with Tiffany's water, setting it down with shaky hands. "Here you go, ma'am," she said quietly. Tiffany didn't even look at her. "Thanks, you can go now." Melissa hesitated for a split second before retreating. Tiffany took a sip of her water, her lips curling into a small, satisfied smirk. She wasn't done with Melissa, not by a long shot, but she also wasn't going to waste her energy on someone who clearly didn't know who she was dealing with. About an hour into the flight, Tiffany noticed something. Melissa kept glancing at her, her eyes darting nervously like a kid who just got caught stealing cookies. It was almost funny, really. Almost. Tiffany decided to play along. When Melissa passed by again, Tiffany stopped her with a casual, "Hey, can I ask you something?" Melissa froze like a deer in headlights. "Of course, ma'am. What can I do for you?" Tiffany leaned back in her seat, crossing her legs with the kind of deliberate confidence that made it clear she was in control. "I'm just curious. Do you always treat your first-class passengers like criminals, or is this a special service you offer just for me?" The cabin went dead silent. Even the guy in the next seat, who'd been furiously typing away on his laptop, paused mid-keystroke. Melissa stammered, her cheeks turning a deep shade of red. I didn't mean..." "Oh, don't worry," Tiffany interrupted, her voice smooth but sharp. "You didn't mean anything by it, right? It's just a misunderstanding. Happens all the time. Like when you assumed I wasn't on the list, or when you tried to send me back to the desk like I didn't belong here. Totally innocent, I'm sure." Melissa looked like she wanted to crawl into the nearest overhead compartment and disappear. Tiffany just smiled, taking another sip of her water. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't making a scene, but the message was crystal clear. "Don't mess with me, sweetheart." As the flight continued, Tiffany couldn't help but chuckle to herself. Melissa had no idea who she was dealing with, and honestly, that was the best part. Tiffany wasn't the type to announce her power. She preferred to let people dig their own graves, and Melissa? Oh, she was digging like her life depended on it. But Tiffany wasn't in any rush. She had time. And when the moment was right, she'd make sure Melissa understood exactly who she'd been messing with. For now, though, Tiffany sat back, sipped her water, and watched the clouds drift by outside the window. Because sometimes, the best revenge is patience. And Tiffany Harris? She had patience in spades. By hour 3 of the flight, Melissa looked like she'd rather jump out of the emergency exit than walk past Tiffany again. But Tiffany? Oh, she was cool as a cucumber, sipping her water like she didn't have a care in the world. Except she did. Because Melissa had crossed a line, and Tiffany wasn't the type to let that slide. The tension came to a head during meal service. Melissa, clearly avoiding eye contact, fumbled with Tiffany's tray table, knocking over her water. The splash hit Tiffany's pants and tablecloth. Melissa's face went pale. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." Save it, Tiffany said, grabbing a napkin. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were ice cold. Is this part of your stellar first-class service? Melissa stammered an apology, but Tiffany didn't let her off the hook. Let me guess. It was an accident. Just like it was an accident when you tried to kick me off this flight? The guy in the next seat tried to hide a grin. Melissa, meanwhile, looked like she wanted to disappear. Later, Melissa returned with the head flight attendant, Mark, who had the unenviable job of trying to smooth things over. Ma'am, Mark began, I understand there's been a misunderstanding. On behalf of the crew, I'd like to apologize. A misunderstanding? Tiffany's brow arched. No, sweetie. A misunderstanding is when you forget your umbrella on a rainy day. This is a disaster. Mark stumbled through an apology and Tiffany let him, all while Melissa stood behind him, fidgeting like a kid sent to the principal's office. Finally, Tiffany leaned forward and said, just make sure this doesn't happen again. To anyone. Mark nodded, visibly relieved, and ushered Melissa away. As the plane descended, Melissa made one last attempt to make amends, offering a bottle of champagne. Tiffany looked at it, then back at Melissa. Champagne, Tiffany said, her tone sharp. That's what you think will fix this? Honey, this isn't a party and I'm not celebrating. Melissa set the bottle down and scurried off. Tiffany smirked. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. When the plane landed in San Francisco, Tiffany was the picture of calm. She gathered her things, adjusting her tailored jacket like she had all the time in the world. Melissa was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in the galley, Tiffany thought with a smirk. Smart move. But Melissa had no idea the storm she'd unleashed. As Tiffany stepped into the terminal, she made a quick call. Her voice was measured, professional, but there was no mistaking the edge in her tone. Hi, it's me. I need you to set up a meeting with the airline's executive team, today. The person on the other end must have responded with urgency because Tiffany smiled and said, yes, it's that important. By the time Tiffany arrived at the airline's executive offices later that afternoon, the wheels were already in motion. She was ushered into a conference room where the airline's CEO and a handful of senior executives sat waiting. Their faces a mix of confusion and nervousness. They knew who she was now, and they knew this meeting wasn't going to be pleasant. Tiffany took her seat at the head of the table, her presence commanding the room, without her having to say a word. Finally, she broke the silence. I'm here because your crew thought it was appropriate to treat me like I didn't belong in first class, she began, her tone calm but razor sharp. Let me make one thing very clear. That behavior doesn't just reflect poorly on your employees. It reflects poorly on you. The CEO fumbled for words, but Tiffany raised a hand. Don't bother, I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to ensure this never happens again. What Melissa didn't know, what no one on that flight had known, was that Tiffany wasn't just a passenger. She was one of the primary stakeholders in the very airport they'd departed from. Her influence extended far beyond a single airline, and now that she'd experienced the disrespect firsthand, she was ready to use that influence to make changes. This isn't just about me, Tiffany continued, her voice firm. It's about every passenger who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. Fix your training, fix your culture, or I'll fix it for you. The executives nodded quickly, promising swift action. Tiffany leaned back, satisfied. She didn't need to yell or make threats. Her authority spoke for itself. Back at the airport, Melissa received a summons to meet with her manager. As she sat in the office, sweating bullets, she had no idea what was coming. When she learned who Tiffany really was, her face drained of color. The manager sighed. Melissa, you made a mistake. A big one. And now we have to deal with the fallout. Melissa tried to explain, but it was too late. Tiffany had already set the wheels of accountability in motion. Changes were coming, and Melissa wouldn't be part of them. As Tiffany's car pulled away from the airport, she allowed herself a small smile. Justice wasn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes, it was quiet, calculated, and delivered with precision. Melissa would think twice before disrespecting anyone again, and Tiffany? She'd made sure of it, because if there was one thing Tiffany Harris didn't tolerate, it was being underestimated.